Most people think they already have a pretty good idea of how deep the vagina is. They base it on what they felt years ago, or what they saw in a diagram once, or what someone confidently announced back in college. And because no one ever told them otherwise, they carry that assumption for decades, sometimes believing the vagina is far deeper than it is, sometimes believing it is much shorter, and often assuming it never really changes. But here's the interesting part. Almost everyone is wrong. Not just by a little, by enough that it explains frustrations older couples quietly keep to themselves. Maybe you've wondered why something that used to feel perfectly comfortable now feels a little different, or why a position that was once easy suddenly needs adjusting, or why one partner thinks they're too much or not enough when the real issue has nothing to do with size at all. And maybe, just maybe, you have both blamed age, or hormones, or each other, without ever understanding what's truly going on. Welcome to the Female Health Podcast, where we talk about the questions people whisper, ignore, or joke about, but rarely receive proper answers to. I'm Dr. Leah Parker, gynecologist and intimate health psychologist, and I've spent more than 30 years listening to couples describe what they think is wrong with their bodies, when in reality, their bodies are doing something completely normal. Today we're finally exploring a question that seems simple, but never is. How deep is the vagina really? Now, if you think the answer is a single number, it isn't. If you think it stays the same throughout life, it doesn't. And if you think depth alone determines comfort or compatibility, it absolutely does not. Because the vagina doesn't sit there like a static tube waiting to be measured. It shifts, it lengthens, it softens, it tightens, it expands, and it reacts to age, hormones, emotional connection, pelvic floor strength, and even the kind of day you've had. Its depth is only the starting point, and that starting point tells far less of the story than people imagine. So here's where we're heading in this episode, and why it matters for both women and men, especially later in life. We're going to begin at rest, when the body is calm and quiet. That's where we'll find the baseline most people misjudge. Then we'll move into what happens when arousal begins, long before anything physical happens, and how the body creates space in a way that surprises almost everyone. After that, we'll talk about aging, menopause, and why sensation shifts over time in ways no one warned you about. Then we'll look at the pelvic floor, which controls far more of the experience than depth ever has. And finally, we'll bring everything together to explain why most couples are far more compatible than they think, regardless of size, age, or experience. By the end of this episode, you'll not only know the true depth of the vagina, but you'll also understand why that depth changes, how that change affects comfort, and what couples can do at 60, 70, and beyond to stay connected, confident, and comfortable. When the body is calm, everything seems simple. No excitement, no anticipation, no shift in blood flow, just the quiet version of the vagina that most people think represents the whole story. And this is exactly where most of the misunderstandings begin. Because when you picture the vagina at rest, you probably imagine its depth based on old assumptions. Maybe you picture a space that goes surprisingly far back. Or maybe you imagine the opposite, something shallow, almost flat, barely there. People tend to choose one extreme or the other, and they hold on to that idea for years. But the resting vagina is not an open hallway, it is not a straight tube, it is not sitting there stretched out and ready. It is soft, it is folded, it leans gently against itself, almost like a pocket that has no reason to open, and when it is in this state, it has a measurable depth, a real one, but not the depth people keep imagining in their minds. This is the depth physicians work with during a pelvic examination. This is the depth many women feel when something touches the cervix unexpectedly. This is the depth older women sometimes worry about when intimacy starts to feel different. And this is the depth partners think about when they wonder, quietly, whether they are too much or not enough. But here is the part nobody explains. The starting depth is not the final depth, not even close. At rest, the vagina is in its most compact form. Think of it as the closed position, not because anything is wrong, but because nothing has asked it to do anything yet. And this is why so many couples misinterpret discomfort. If intimacy begins too quickly, the body has not had time to adjust. That resting depth is still in place, the space has not expanded, the tissues have not softened, the internal shape has not changed, and this explains a lot, why some positions feel uncomfortable, why examinations can feel more intense than expected, why older women say something feels different before anything even begins. But this resting state, this calm, folded version, is only the starting point. It is not the version the body relies on during intimacy, and it is definitely not the version that determines compatibility between partners. Because the moment the body begins to respond, everything changes. The shape changes, the depth changes, the angle changes, the entire internal structure shifts into something completely different. And that next shape, the one almost nobody understands until they see it explained, is where the real story begins. When arousal begins, the vagina does something most people never picture. It does not open like a door, it does not simply relax, and it definitely does not stay in the same shape it holds at rest. Instead, the entire internal structure starts shifting in a way that feels almost mechanical, but is driven entirely by blood flow, muscle response, and instinct. It starts quietly, a warmth, a softening, a gentle change in pressure. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but inside something is happening. The walls begin to thicken with blood, not swelling outward, but lifting upward, almost stretching themselves away from whatever might enter. The space inside does not widen first, it lengthens, as if the body knows that more room is needed before anything else can feel good. And this is where most people get surprised, because the vagina does not wait for penetration to adjust. It prepares in advance. It makes space before there is anything to make space for. As the upper portion begins to rise, the canal starts to feel deeper, not because a new space has magically appeared, but because the internal structures are pulling upward and creating distance. It is a shift that older women often notice without knowing the reason. A feeling of more room when arousal is strong, and far less room when arousal is rushed. This change creates comfort. This change prevents the too much, too fast feeling. This change is the difference between tension and ease, and here is where couples often get confused. When arousal takes longer with age, because of hormones, dryness, or simply the pace of life, this internal change also takes longer. The space does not instantly open, the tissues do not instantly lengthen, the body does not instantly prepare, so the experience feels different, not because anyone has changed sizes, but because the body needs more time to shift into this expanded shape. For some couples, that delay becomes worry. Are we still compatible? Did something change? Is the vagina smaller now? Is the penis too much? No, the body is just waiting for its own process to start. And now that we have gone through all of this, now that you can picture the lifted walls, the extra space, the comfortable depth created only through arousal, we can finally name what is happening. This entire transformation is called tenting, a simple word for a surprisingly elegant process, a process the body relies on at every age, but one that becomes more sensitive to timing as women reach their 60s, 70s, and beyond. And here is the important part: this process does not disappear with age, it just changes. And the way it changes explains so many frustrations couples blame on themselves. Because something else begins to influence this shift as the years go by, something powerful, often unnoticed, and deeply connected to comfort. And that is exactly where we are heading next. For many women, the first signs of change appear quietly: a little dryness that was not there before, a slower warm-up, even when the desire is still there, a position that once felt easy suddenly feeling sharp or deep or just off. And for couples who have been together for decades, it can be confusing. Nothing seems wrong, yet something clearly feels different. These changes catch people by surprise because they arrive gradually. 1 year everything feels familiar. Then little by little, the body starts asking for more time, more patience, more intention, and older women often blame themselves. They think they have become too sensitive, or too tense, or not the way they used to be, but the truth is far simpler and far kinder. Menopause is not a switch, it is a shift, a slow rebalancing of hormones that affects the entire pelvic area. When estrogen decreases, the tissues lose some of the natural moisture they once produced easily. They also lose a bit of stretch, a bit of fullness, a bit of softness, not dramatically, not alarmingly, but enough that the vagina at rest feels slightly different, and the vagina during arousal takes longer to reach that comfortable expanded shape. This is why that earlier transformation, tenting, does not happen as quickly as it once did. The tissues respond more slowly. The blood flow ramps up more gradually. The lengthening still happens, but the body wants more preparation first. This is not a failure. It is biology adjusting with age, the same way skin changes or joints feel stiffer in the morning. There are also tiny shifts in sensitivity, not always less sensitivity, sometimes more. A tenderness here, a new pressure there, a feeling of being hit too soon because the deeper space has not had time to form yet. When the upper portion of the vagina has not lifted fully, anything that reaches that area too quickly can feel sharp or unexpected. And this is where many couples slip into worry. Did something shrink? Is something wrong with my body? Are we no longer compatible? No, none of that. The body is doing exactly what it is supposed to do at this stage of life. It simply needs different conditions than it did in the past. And when couples understand that, everything changes. The frustration softens, the fear dissolves, the closeness returns. These shifts are completely normal. They are common, they are manageable, and they do not mean anything is broken or failing. In fact, most of the discomfort women experience in their 60s and 70s has far less to do with the vagina itself, and far more to do with something nearby that controls the entire experience. Something that tightens when you are stressed, something that weakens when it is ignored, something that reacts to age just as strongly as the vaginal tissues do, and that something is the part of the story most couples never learn about, but feel the effects of every single day. We are going there next. For years, women have used the words too loose or too tight to describe intimate changes. Some say they do not feel as much as they used to. Others say they feel almost too much, and partners hear these words and start making their own assumptions, usually the wrong ones. Because here is the truth, those phrases almost never describe the vagina itself. They describe the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is the muscular foundation under everything. It wraps around the vagina like a supportive sling, controlling tension, relaxation, and the feeling of opening or closing. When these muscles are strong and responsive, the vagina feels toned, flexible, and comfortable. When they are weak, everything feels less supported. And when they are tight, which many older women never realize is the case, penetration can feel sharp, shallow, or impossible to relax into. So when someone says, "I feel loose," it is often weakness. When someone says, "I feel too tight," it is often tension. And when someone says, "I do not feel like myself anymore," it is usually this system asking for attention. Elasticity also plays a role. The vaginal tissues are designed to stretch and recoil, not endlessly, but beautifully. However, when estrogen dips and the pelvic floor weakens, the tissues lose some of that natural bounce, not because of age alone, but because the whole system is working harder without the hormonal support it once had. And this affects both partners. When the pelvic floor is tense, men often say they feel blocked or pushed out. When the pelvic floor is weak, they say they feel less welcomed, even if they do not use those words. Both sensations have nothing to do with actual size and everything to do with muscular tone and tissue flexibility. Let me give you an example. A woman in her late 60s once came to me certain that her vagina had closed up. She said she could feel pressure instantly, even at the very start, and assumed she was too tight or too short now. After a quick assessment, we found her pelvic floor was gripping out of habit. Years of tension, stress, and the natural changes of menopause had taught those muscles to hold instead of release. Once she learned how to relax those muscles, everything changed. She had not shrunk. She had not lost depth. Her body was simply using the wrong strategy. Stories like hers are common, more common than people think, and they change the way couples understand sensation. Because the question is no longer, is the vagina too loose, or is the penis too big? The real question becomes, are the muscles doing what they are supposed to do? And this brings us to the final part of the conversation, the one couples whisper about, the one they are often too embarrassed to ask. Do two people truly fit together, or not? The answer might surprise you, and it might be far more reassuring than anything you have heard before. That is where we are going next. When couples reach their 60s, 70s, or beyond, one question begins to surface more often than you would ever expect. Are we still a good fit? Not emotionally, physically. People rarely say it out loud, but they worry that age has changed them so much that their bodies no longer match. Here is the truth. Most couples remain far more compatible than they ever realize, because everything we have talked about, the resting depth, the expanding depth, the shifts that happen with arousal, the effects of menopause, the role of the pelvic floor, all of it leads to one simple understanding: the vagina is built to adapt. It is designed to adjust, to make room, to soften, to lengthen, to shift its angle, to support comfort, and to return to its resting state afterward. That adaptability does not vanish with age. It just needs more time, more support, and sometimes a little guidance. When the body is calm, the vagina is compact. When arousal begins, the space expands. When hormones change, the process slows down. And when the pelvic floor shifts, sensations change. Put those pieces together, and it becomes clear. Compatibility is not about size. It is about timing, preparation, and understanding what the body needs now, not what it needed at 25. Older women often assume discomfort means they no longer fit their partner. Older men often assume a change in sensation means they are too much or not enough. In reality, the body is asking for something it had automatically when both people were younger: more moisture, more arousal time, more communication, more patience, more softness, and more awareness of tension in the pelvic floor. None of these needs are failures. They are simply the new instructions for the same relationship, and when couples follow those instructions, even just a little, something remarkable happens. The discomfort fades, the pressure eases, the body opens the way it used to. The connection deepens because both partners finally understand what is happening inside the body, instead of guessing or blaming themselves. So here is the gentle summary of everything we have explored together. The vagina at rest is shorter than people think. During arousal, it lengthens and makes room. Age and menopause change the speed of that transformation. The pelvic floor controls far more sensation than most people realize, and compatibility is rarely the problem. Understanding is. If you want guidance on how to stay comfortable and confident after 60, I created a free guide that walks you through lubrication options, arousal warm-up techniques, pelvic floor tips, and partner communication tools. You can find it in the description below. It is simple, practical, and designed specifically for couples in this stage of life. And remember, you are not too old, you are not too late, you are not out of sync. Your body is normal, your relationship is normal, and as always, take care of yourself because you are worth it.